Okay, let's talk a little bit about the narrative arc. Over the ages that mankind has been telling stories, there are some patterns that have emerged, and one of those is the narrative arc, and this is generally the best method of telling a story. And this is something that you can use not only in this class, but just in general. Just remember, this is very typical. Now, I'm going to also give you how you can apply this to this essay assignment, but the basics of telling a story have to do with what we call the narrative arc. And the narrative arc would go as follows. We always start in any narrative, we need to have the setting. So we need to know when, where. Some of the basic information is generally given at the beginning of the story. We need to know, okay, how old were you when this happened? We need to know, where was this, what was going on. There are certain things that we just need to know early on in order for the rest of the story to make any sense. Having said this, the next thing that happens is there needs to be some kind of entry of conflict. No story, no movie, there's no story that is any good without there being some kind of change or some kind of conflict. We could say conflict, we could just say change. There's something that changed. It doesn't necessarily have to be conflict. It could be that a person was stricken with a disease, okay? When I was a little kid, my grandmother got cancer, okay? It causes conflict. It causes a conflict within your life, but it's this change that happens. Some kind of change has to happen in order for you to even just have a story, okay? So once that change happens, well, what did you do about it? Okay, what is this? What is it that happens? What is it? What actions do you take? So we take action, and this leads to what we call the climax. Okay, I took action, this is what I did, and typically that could even be the climax. You could have the action be the climax. This is whenever, they blew up the Death Star. Okay, they took action against this big evil thing that was coming through the galaxy, and okay, so that is the action, that is the climax. Now, that's not the end of the story because, okay, the climax, that's great, but we need to have some kind of resolution. So we have resolution. What happened? What was the result of this action? How did everything play out? Okay, they saved the villagers, but then, okay, how did this happen? Did they make me the mayor, or did they run me out of town? What was the action that followed, or what was the reaction that followed that action, that climax? Okay, I stood up to the bully, right? We've got the climax, we've got the action. I stood up to the bully, and maybe the climax, I got beat up, or I beat up the bully. Okay, great. So that's the action I took. That's the climax, the big scene, right? One of my favorite series of movies. Okay, so we got Rocky Balboa, right? Okay, they fought whomever, right? Okay, we fought Apollo. Didn't necessarily win, okay? But what happened? Well, he was seen as a great winner. He was this nobody that went on out of nowhere to challenge the champion. Okay, so what is the resolution? What is the result of that action? So we've got different stations on this narrative arc. Okay, and that's just typical storytelling things. Now, there are more stations that we could add, but this is not a creative writing class. This is an essay writing class. So these are the basic areas of the things that you need to hit anytime you tell a story. And typically, we're telling stories to illustrate a point. Yes, we do tell stories to entertain, but generally, there is some other purpose to telling a story. Don't do drugs. Well, let me tell you about this person that did drugs. Or I'll tell you about whenever I used to be a drug addict, kids, I'll tell you about it. Or you need to study hard in school. Let me tell you about this person who studied hard in school, and I'll give you this example. Or don't go to school. Let me tell you about Bill Gates or whatever. But the point is, we tell a story to illustrate a point. And that is the whole crux of this assignment, the narrative essay. We're going to add 2 more stations to the narrative arc because we're going to write an essay about it. So we're going to add the introduction, and we're going to add the conclusion. Now, oftentimes in introduction, you'll have this is the thesis. This is the thing I'm going to prove. And in this assignment, I'd like you to have that. So in the very first paragraph of this assignment, the very first paragraph of your essay, remember, we're just introducing the topic that we're going to prove, okay? So a person might tell a story and say, okay, you shouldn't let a bully get you down. Okay, that's the point I'm going to prove. Now, I'm not going to tell you the story here. I'm going to tell you the story here. Okay? The introduction is just there to introduce the concept. So maybe you might say, there are school grounds across the country, and every year there's lots of kids who get bullied. These days, you can get bullied on the playground, but you can be bullied online just as easily as you can be bullied on the playground. Whether it's on the playground or online, bullying is wrong and something that shouldn't be done. However, in this world we live in, occasionally we get bullied, and if someone's bullying you, you should stand up to the bully, or whatever it is you're trying to prove, right? But basically, I didn't tell the story here. I'm going to tell the story here. Once I get done telling the story, just like we talked about in the last video, I'm just going to remind you that you should stand up to bullies. I'm not going to retell the story. I'm just going to remind you, yes, you can get bullied anywhere. There's lots of ways to be bullied. And I'm going to come back to that main thesis, that main point that I was trying to prove. We should not sit down while bullies try to beat us up. Or we should stand up to bullies. Okay, now, in the next video, I'm going to give you an example of how you can apply this to this narrative arc, specifically to a situation that you've had in your life.